Same way you did. Go ahead, please.
You mentioned that the shooter was radicalized online.
I think so. By the way, when I say that, that's my opinion. I think he was radicalized online based on what they're saying.
Do social media companies bear any responsibility for that? And how does that
I'm going to have to ask, I don't know, I'd ask Pam that question. I don't know if you or Todd could give an answer to that. Somebody has to bear some responsibility.
And President Trump, I've always told parents, you got to watch what your kids are doing on the internet, what they're doing online, what they're listening to, what they're reading. They're all online. They're all on their phones all the time. Parents have got to monitor that because this starts when you're young. This starts when you're young, when you listen to these groups, when you watch these shows, and parents have got to just be vigilant. So sure, that's part of it. And they're meeting kids online who they think are kids, and they can be anywhere in the world and talking to them. And yeah, they are being radicalized.
Mr. President.
He went bad, and he just went bad very quickly in a sense, because he sort of led a very normal life, a life of, great education, schools, everything else. But somewhere along the line, something happened. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. How will you use?
Girls, mix ice, pink salt, and 2 ingredients from your fridge door and get ready to turn heads with your summer body. Let's get straight to the point. Apple cider vinegar, ginger, pink salt, ice, and the last ingredient I'll reveal in the next 15 seconds.
An apparent confession. The alleged killer of Charlie Kirk reportedly confessing to the assassination just hours before his arrest. According to the Washington Post, Tyler Robinson posted an online message at 7:57 p.m. on Thursday, telling friends, quote, "Hey guys, I have bad news for you all. It was me at UVU yesterday. I'm sorry for all of this." Now that message was posted on Discord, a messaging platform that is popular with video gamers, and it continues. He says, quote, "I'm surrendering through a sheriff friend in a few moments. Thanks for all the good times and laughs. You've all been so amazing. Thank you all for everything." Well, 2 hours later, Robinson did surrender to authorities. And the breaking news from the Washington Post comes just hours before the Utah County attorney lays out the charges against Robinson, and just before Robinson makes his first court appearance, which we will all see. The report comes on the heels of a New York Times report with more details about what Robinson was posting to another chat group with about 20 people in it, another group on Discord that happened earlier on Thursday. And it happened actually just after the FBI had released the first grainy images of Robinson, which, when we saw them, I think initial reaction was, look, if you know that guy, you're going to know he's that guy. So an acquaintance of Robinson writes in this group on Discord, according to the New York Times, WYA, which means where you at, along with a skull emoji. Robinson responding within seconds, saying his, quote, doppelganger was trying to get him in trouble. Now, that was reportedly on Thursday afternoon. He was still on the run. This was 24 hours after he allegedly killed Kirk. So it was about 9 hours before he was apprehended. The message continued, at times making light of Kirk's death. Robinson's reported messages are offering now a crucial glimpse into his mindset before and after the killing and what he was doing when he was on the run, right? He's in these chat groups. So in a moment, I'm going to speak to the Washington Post and New York Times reporters who broke these stories. I want to begin, though, with Danny Freeman. He is out front. He is live in Orem, Utah. And Danny, the first court appearance is hours away. So what are you learning tonight?
Well, listen, Aaron, we have learned so much more about the suspect here, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, but it's really been a slow drip over the course of the past few days since that shooting. Well, now Utah officials are promising that tomorrow we're going to be learning a lot more information. A lot more is going to be released to the public, and that's so crucial because so many here in Utah are desperate for more answers.
FBI Director Kash Patel revealing DNA evidence now connects 22-year-old Tyler Robinson directly to the crime scene.
I can report today that the DNA hits from the towel that was wrapped around the firearm and the DNA on the screwdriver are positively processed for the suspect in custody.
But law enforcement officials are still working to understand what may have driven this young man to allegedly open fire on Charlie Kirk.
We are still conducting follow-up interviews and a lot of investigative leads to determine any relationship that may have played into this, whether that be political or personal or any of those.
Investigators are focusing in on a note that Robinson may have written prior to the shooting that the FBI director says has since been destroyed.
We have evidence to show what was in that note, which is, and I'm going to summarize, basically saying, the suspect wrote a note saying, I have the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk, and I'm going to take it.
Another area of interest and help to authorities so far has been Robinson's roommate.
The roommate was a romantic partner, a male transitioning to female. This partner has been incredibly cooperative, had no idea that this was happening, and is working with investigators right now.
Officials are still investigating whether the roommate relationship may have factored into a potential motive. Robinson lived and grew up here in Southwest Utah in a conservative family, acquaintances told CNN. And according to the governor, Robinson moved very far left in recent years.
These are the facts that are being presented to us. Family discussions, parents, this is what they're saying.
In Robinson's hometown, his community mourned Charlie Kirk while processing that the suspected assassin was a neighbor.
It's really hard. You just can't imagine someone from around here would do something like that.
Sherry Staley Tate's family has been here for 5 generations and told us Robinson went to school with her daughter.
I said, well, how would you describe him? And she said, I would describe him as, those kids they're kind of too smart, that they're not common sense smart.
And now, Aaron, I'll also say that community in Southwest Utah also made a point to pray not just for Charlie Kirk and his family, but also for the Robinson family. Aaron, all eyes now here back up in northern Utah on tomorrow, because that's when that first court appearance is expected to take place. Aaron?
Danny, thank you so much. On the ground in Utah. Out front now, the 2 reporters who obtained these Discord messages sent by Tyler Robinson in the hours before he was taken into custody. Hannah Knowles of the Washington Post and Nicholas Bogle-Burrows of the New York Times. Both of these reporters received messages from people in these 2 different chat groups. And so, Hannah, let's start with this group message that you saw. Robinson confesses in the message you saw to about 30 people in a group. And the quote of the message that you obtained was, "Hey guys, I have news for you all. It was me at UVU yesterday. I'm sorry for all of this." Hard to imagine how a group would even react to something like that, whether they would even believe it. I mean, from what you saw, what more can you tell us about what he said in his confession and how people in that group responded?
So Tyler's account on Discord went on to say he was going to turn himself into law enforcement momentarily through what he called a sheriff friend. And then he sort of said goodbye to his friends in a way. He said, "Thanks for everything. Thanks for the good times."
I mean, it's pretty incredible, Hannah, to even think about this, right? I mean, about 30 people the day after Robinson's arrest. I mean, you've been looking at these messages and you say that a friend wrote in the same group chat that we're talking about here, while Charlie Kirk's politics were not acceptable to some, I ask that we all say a prayer for him and his family during these confusing times. Now, this is obviously after Robinson's arrest, right, for allegedly assassinating Kirk. So presumably at this point, 30 people now know that this guy in their group is the one accused of doing this. So how would you describe the relationship between Tyler and everyone else in this particular group chat?
Yeah, so I don't want to get into too much of who was in this group beyond that they were friends of Tyler's who interacted with him online on this platform. But yeah, what was really interesting was after Tyler's account posts this on Thursday night, the night after the shooting, the chat just goes silent, and there is no response that night. And then the next day after, Tyler's name is now out in the news, after he's been arrested, a friend eventually chimes in to say, that note you mentioned, basically asking people in the group to pray for Tyler and also to pray for Charlie Kirk and his family.
But there was silence when they find out it's him. And at least in terms of their conversation on Discord that you're looking at, they're not discussing that somebody they knew, somebody in their group is accused of this?
I would imagine some of them were probably talking about it somewhere if they saw that message, but not in that channel.
Right. It's pretty stunning. Okay, so Nicholas, the messages you obtained are sent by Robinson earlier in the day. So this is on Thursday afternoon to a second Discord group of about 20 people. So this is a different group. It's another 20 people. So this is at least 50 people that are having these conversations. I'm just sort of doing basic math. Who knows how many groups, but this is this other group. And It was shortly after the FBI had released the photo. So at this point, he hadn't turned himself in. They didn't know who he was. In the group, that what you've seen, Robinson's friends start joking that looks like him. And then within a minute, you say that he wrote back, and I quote Nicholas from your reporting, that he posts, "My effing doppelganger trying to get me in trouble." And then you report somebody joked the group should turn him into the FBI to get the reward money, to which Robinson replied from your reporting, "Only if I get a cut." This is incredible stuff, Nicholas. Tell me more about the messages you saw.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this is 24 hours after the assassination has taken place. Like you said, the FBI has just released these first sort of grainy photos. And someone who knows Tyler in this Discord chat says, like you said, "Where are you at?" And he responds by basically suggesting that his doppelganger is trying to get him in trouble, making jokes about it. At some point, they made a reference to Luigi Mangione, who's accused of the assassination in Midtown Manhattan. And they told him, "Don't go to a McDonald's." They're sort of joking around with him. And he keeps joking back, saying, "I better also get rid of this manifesto and exact copy rifle I have lying around." It's, about 9 hours before he ultimately turned himself in.
Yeah. Okay. So then, Nicholas, you've got another message just sent around the same time that some news outlets were incorrectly reporting that ammo had been engraved referencing transgender ideology. And you report that Robinson wrote about this, and I quote from your reporting, "I heard the ammo had something about trans stuff on it, but they aren't releasing photos or exact quotes. And also the claim wasn't backed by the official FBI, just some dude in the briefing room." So obviously at this point, it's very clear from this, he's following it very closely, maybe even testing to see how closely others in the group are following it right after they'd seen the images. What was your sense as you look through that and other messages around that time, at this point, hours before his arrest?
Right. I mean, from what he's saying, it sounds like someone who is closely following the news developments of the shooting, who is, discussing it with his friends and sort of just trying to distinguish what is confirmed information and what's not. So it shows that it's someone who's, definitely keeping an eye on this major shooting.
Been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing.
Having a bateria nonprofit is an extremely expensive proposition because we have to get instruments. We have to be able to store those, take them to a place where we can rehearse the show that we put on as well too. When I hear another nonprofit talking about these processing fees as the cost of doing business, I can say to them, have you heard of Zeffy? When you log into Zeffy, it shows you right there on the side how much you have saved. I can look at that number and I can say that covers the expense of like these new drums that we're going to buy. Zeffy is 100% free for nonprofits, no credit card fees, no platform fees, no ticketing fees, and they've never charged us a dime in the 3 years that we've been using.
Joining me now is the author of groundbreaking works, international bestsellers, his latest on democracies and death cults. Douglas Murray, let's start with the murder of Charlie Kirk, one of the brightest and bravest voices of his generation, a genuinely decent man, a father of two, shot dead at the age of 31, at the type of event that had really become synonymous with his name. He understood the importance of robust debate, of maintaining dialogue with your ideological opponents.
When people stop talking, really bad stuff starts. When marriages stop talking, divorce happens. When civilizations stop talking, civil war ensues. When you stop having a human connection with someone you disagree with, it becomes a lot easier to want to commit violence against that group. What we as a culture have to get back to is being able to have reasonable disagreement where violence is not an option.
Douglas, this is a heartbreaking, unimaginable loss.
Yeah, we're speaking just a few hours after the murder of Charlie Kirk. And I suppose, like everyone, my thoughts are with Charlie, but also his wife, his young wife, and his two young children that he leaves behind. It's an extraordinary, appalling act of violence. And I wish I could say that it's completely surprising, but it isn't, because, of course, we've had assassination attempts on President Trump, who Charlie Kirk has been a very vocal supporter and ally of for many years now. And there have been many threats over the years against Charlie himself. What we just heard him saying in that video is something that Charlie said often, and it's completely true. He spent a lot of his energies since he first came onto the scene at the young age of about 18 or so, and founded Turning Point. Since then, he had always made an effort to stress this point that, yes, you need to be able to talk. You need to have differences of opinion out in the public square, and that it is the best way to avoid a descent into political violence. And although he made that point so often, so many of his critics, most of whom I suspect really never listened to anything that Charlie said, demonized him, misrepresented him, and did that classic thing that unfortunately so much of the left does, which is to regard their political opponents not just as wrong, but as evil. And this is something that many of us have pointed out over the years. Most conservatives tend to think that the left is wrong, but not that it is certainly not in its entirety evil. But that favor is not returned the other way around. And so we have people routinely claiming that mainstream conservative voices like Charlie Kirk's are somehow extreme, and that they somehow themselves are causing harm. Think of all the people in recent years who Charlie has talked about, who you and I, Rita, have talked about, who have said that words are violence, and that countering ideas or questioning ideas is literally killing people, and much more. Well, here we see once again the reality of it. Words are not violence. Shooting somebody in the throat is violence. And I really hope that a moment like this, as well as thinking of Charlie and his family, people think if they're on the side that has been demonizing their opponents to such an extent and dehumanizing them, I hope they think themselves about the fruits of their own words.
And Charlie was rare. He had the ability to persuade so many from across the political divide. That's rare these days. It made him enormously influential, particularly amongst young men. And Douglas, it was such a wholesome message at its heart. It was about prioritizing family and religion and truth. Yes. And you spoke about the hate he received. It was so unhinged, so ugly, a lot of it from media. And it continued even after he was shot. Let me play you a little of the discussion on MSNBC earlier today.
He's been one of the most divisive, especially divisive younger figures in this, who is constantly sort of pushing this sort of hate speech or sort of aimed at certain groups. And I always go back to hateful thoughts lead to hateful words, which then lead to hateful actions.
I'm not going to say what I want to say. What's your response, Douglas, to what you just heard? That was Matthew Dowd on MSNBC earlier.
Well, I mean, the obvious thing is to make a rhetorical point about what Dowd said there, which is, what if somebody had hateful thoughts about him? What if his hateful words that he said just there led to somebody shooting him or a loved one of his or a friend of his in the throat? Would he exercise the same attempt at logical consistency then? I would think not, probably. But yes, that is an absolutely classic example of smearing the only just dead. And what Matthew Dowd said there is completely shameful. And if MSNBC had any shame, they would have said that immediately to him and taken him off the air. What Charlie Kirk argued for throughout his public life, which was effectively throughout his adult life, were very straightforward things that were not controversial until very, very recently. For instance, what this ignoramus Dowd thinks is controversial, if he bothered ever to listen to anything that Charlie Kirk said, and I doubt he did before deciding to smear him before his corpse is cold. What Charlie Kirk said were things like, there are two sexes. There are men and there are women. He said America is a tremendous country, and he was enormously proud of it and an extraordinary patriot. That wasn't, neither of these things were controversial until very, very recently. Charlie Kirk argued for biblical values, for Judeo-Christian values. That wasn't controversial until extremely recently. None of what Charlie Kirk argued for was in any way hateful. I wish, as I say, that people like Dowd, MSNBC, and many others realize that the hate has been so disproportionately coming from them. It's them who say that saying that America is a good country is somehow hateful. It's them that says that saying that there are two biological sexes is somehow hateful. No, it isn't. None of that was ever hateful. It was a statement of fact or of opinion, and that used to be allowed in America. And that used to be respected in America. And it's a terrible, terrible demonstration of where America and the West has come to, that the statement of obvious truths and the statement of opinions that millions and millions of people hold fast to should be smeared in this way.
Dowd said plenty more, and there's been other media outlets who've disgraced themselves today. Just to clarify, he made those comments after Charlie was shot, but before his death was announced. But shameful at any time to be saying that, to be blaming the victim for speaking the truth. Douglas, the next generation of young men in particular are becoming increasingly conservative, increasingly right-wing, rejecting so much of the leftist ideology that's been shoved down their throats by the culture, by schools and universities. And like yourself, Charlie Kirk has played a significant role in that, in opening the eyes of so many young Americans, young people across the West, and making them unafraid to speak, making them say their opinions boldly and putting forward an alternative view to the prevailing dogma. And Douglas, he always did it so politely, even in the face of terrible abuse. I used to play his videos on this program all the time, the interactions where he would cop this ugly, unhinged abuse, and he would always remain calm and politely dismantle the radical left's arguments in the face of terrible abuse, and they still shot him. No matter how much you spoke about the importance of dialogue, about not demonizing your opponents, about engaging and making sure that we're at a point where we can still talk to each other, and they still shot him.
We'll find out who they is, I suppose, in the coming hours and days. I think that whoever the shooter turns out to be, I do hope that people who listened to Charlie, who were inspired by him, he was an extraordinary communicator. I mean, his success, his earned success over the years of his adult life came about because he had an enormous skill at speaking to people and for people. And he was enormously persuasive. He was enormously skilled and talented. And as I say, it needs to be said again, an incredible patriot. I hope that after this, there will be many people, I suspect, particularly young people who learned a lot from Charlie, admired Charlie, and much more, who will be tempted at a moment like this to sink to the kind of level that they perceive in their opponents. I think these moments can be real crossroads. And I hope that all of those young men and women across America and elsewhere who were inspired and educated and informed by Charlie realize that their task now is to pick up where he left off and to emulate what he did, and to emulate the courtesy, the patriotism, the decency that he showed in his public life, and that they don't sink into the kind of behavior which they see among their opponents. I hope that is the case, because you say, Rita, Charlie always demonstrated such considerable courtesy and decency, even to his political opponents who were screaming abuse at him and much more. So it could be, as I say, it is only hours after this terrible news has come through. It could be one of those moments where some people sink down and meet their opponents on their opponents' terms. But it would be a much better thing for America and for all of us, I think, if we rise above